Hi, this is Kristen Heemstra with We the People Rise. And our podcast today, you are going to learn so much about conflict management, both internal and external. You're going to leave with a bunch of tools that you can use in your everyday life because I have the best guest on. His name is Shai Tamari. And Shai, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why this is your life path and your area of expertise?
Wow, that's a might be a very long answer.
I loaded it right front
That's
loaded. There
okay.
you go.
So, born and raised in Israel, left in 97, lived in England, then Australia, back in England, and then North Carolina, hence the strange accent that's coming out of my mouth. I was involved for quite some time with issues to do with the Middle East. Being from the region, I worked on Capitol Hill. I taught on the Middle East, and it came to a point where it became emotionally too heavy for me to continue. And my students would end the courses feeling really hopeless because they understood the situation too well. And I was like, why am I teaching this? This is not giving me any satisfaction. And I think I was kind of drowning in the hopelessness of it. And so I pivoted to interpersonal conflict management, trying to understand how other people interact with one another, but mostly how I interact or interacted with people. I was very good at creating conflict and being part of conflict growing up. And I wanted to be in a position where I could provide a space for people to figure out who they are and how to proceed in an environment in which they could be true to themselves and also allow other people to be true to themselves and not only accept one another, but accept ourselves. And by doing that, my feeling is that it creates an environment where there is less conflict. And so for the past roughly 10 years, I have been teaching negotiation, mediation skills, and then moved to more interpersonal and internal conflict management. So when I first started teaching, I used to focus on external conflict management. So how do we deal with another person who's having a conflict with somebody else? And I love role plays in my classes. And my students would get into these real arguments. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with you? Don't you know this is all fake? Why are you ruining my class? Not realizing that they were bringing all this baggage and all these unhealed wounds into the classroom. It took me a few years for this to click.
Yeah.
And after a few years of this happening, I realized, oh, I need to be focusing on that. And I realized that I was in a place that I was not really happy. I was not content with myself. And I couldn't really understand what was going on with me. And I joined a men's group about 5.5 years ago. We meet once a week online. And it's a place where we basically delve into our own crap and our own wounds. We're all professional facilitators, and we use the space to work on our own issues. And starting with that group, it was the first time that I saw men being vulnerable and men expressing themselves in an emotional way, in a way that was actually productive and healthy, unlike how I grew up. And that shifted not only how I view myself and how I treat people around me, but also how I actually teach and facilitate classes and workshops. And so I basically pivoted because I did not have an impact on regions that were of interest to me because I was physically not there. I can have an impact on my own community. In my own community these days, apart from my family, are the students that I teach at UNC and at Duke, the courses that I teach in prisons across North Carolina, and the individuals and groups that I interact with through my consultancy, where I provide training and coaching and other facilitation services. And it's the first time where I feel that I'm living my purpose. And for the majority of my life, I did not have that. So I'm not sure if that answers the
Yeah,
question.
No, well, it brings up another, to me, one of the most fascinating things. So, as a background, I have a background in counseling, a background in anthropology, and then I have coaching. But it seems to me that this gap that you were feeling was because you were out of alignment, right? You were experiencing cognitive dissonance or some space there. And then once you managed to close it by going inside instead of looking outside, right? That's when you found like you had greater sovereignty, if you will. Like your voice might have even been stronger, but you feel like this is it. Like I know kind of who I am. I've done the vetting. I pulled out the ugly stuff and I looked at it and it was ugly. And now this is who I am and where I feel most compelled. But it also to me seems that you couldn't have gotten where you are unless you went where you went.
Yes. The story I tell my younger students is I was very lost in my 20s,
Mhm.
searching for what to do and where to be. And then I spent my 30s being angry at my 20s for wasting
Oh,
time. And then I got to my 40s and I realized, oh, my 20s were the stepping stone for who I am today. And so, yes, even this path of dealing with macro level issues, domestic or international conflicts, brought me to understand that what I want to be dealing with are really the issues between individuals and within communities, as opposed to larger scale things that my personal impact is going to be limited. And I see the impact that I have on the people around me. And it's very satisfying and it's very fulfilling. And it's a feeling that I did not have when I was trying to focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or domestic issues in the United States. For me personally, what I'm doing now, my current community is what fulfills me.
You and I are of the same ilk in that my life has also led me to the conclusion that while you can talk about the broader issues, it's bringing the healing to the individual that actually has the greatest impact on the broader issues. And so with emotional intelligence, it's trying to give people those skills, right, on how to manage do your own self-evaluation, your own self-assessment, and learn how to, mitigate the issues that you have or embrace kind of where you want to go. Because then when you find yourself in a broader conversation, because you're, in alignment or whatever word you want to choose, you don't get triggered so easily.
Mhm.
Right? It's kind of like you've shored up your own vulnerabilities, if you will, because you've looked at them. I'm just curious to get your take on so having said all of that about doing your own work, let's talk about the broader world for a moment.
Okay.
As you're seeing, and we'll stay within the United States just because that's our focus right now, but as you see different things playing out in a public forum, what is your lens that you're looking through, and how are you reading the situation?
I'm coming to this from a perspective that the anger that people feel is based on fear.
Hmm.
And having to understand that fear is really important. And understanding that even people that I disagree with feel fear, even though they might not be aware of it. And that is a leading component of our behavior. I know for me that's true. When I get angry at someone, it's because it's triggering an unmet need, and that creates fear of not meeting that need. And so it doesn't mean that I don't get pissed off when I watch certain things in the news, or that I don't get angry or annoyed. And but yet I have now, I think, because I have a better understanding of myself, and I should note that I'm on a lifelong journey
Right.
of figuring out who I am, and I will never reach the destination.
Right.
And that's completely fine. And yet this journey that I'm currently on is allowing me to understand other people's journey, even though they might not be aware of the journey that they're on.
Right.
So in many ways, it can allow me to feel more compassion and kindness to people that my instinct would not be to provide that for them. And I still struggle with that. I joke that I have a PhD in holding grudges. I'm very good at it. I have decades of experience, and I am working really hard to override that instinct, whether it's on a macro, domestic, national issues, but especially personal stuff.
Well, I mean, if you said earlier in our conversation you spent your 30s being mad at yourself for what you did in your 20s, I mean, that's a long grudge to hold against
Mhm.
yourself.
Yes, yes,
So,
it was. It was.
like, if you just extrapolate that out a couple iterations, you can hold a grudge. We'll give you
Right.
that.
Yes.
So, as you recognize that the trigger people often are feeling is associated with some fearful narrative that has been rightly or wrongly internally constructed, that's telling them, to your point, they might not even realize that they're being fearful, that it is a place of fear. How, in your experience, do you help people unpack that in a way that it becomes a salve for them, a balm for them as they're, trying to move through that space?
I think first of all, it's offering a space. When I say a space, a physical place where they can come to
Okay, so
um,
physical.
and share and listen to others, realizing, oh, I'm not the only one.
Mhm.
I think for a majority of my life, I thought I was the only one experiencing and feeling certain things. And once I realized, oh no, there are plenty of other people going through these emotions and experiences. And in many ways, not being unique helps me feel like I belong in that sense. And so, what I do in my classes and what I do in my consultancy is that I arrange spaces for people to come sit around in a circle where there's nothing in between them, just sitting on their chairs. The fact that you don't have a physical barrier kind of helps to connect with others, to see everybody's eyes. And there might be prompts, there might be questions, there might be activities that we do. And I always am the first to answer those questions. And so it's important that I model what I'm hoping they would do, whether it's showing vulnerability or opening up or sharing a part of themselves. And so this is done over a period of time, weeks or months, creates a bond between
Yeah.
people, a sense of belonging, a sense of closeness, and a sense that I'm not alone. I think for me personally, part of the roots of my fear in the past has been I am alone. There's nobody else who's going through this. And me not feeling connected to others increased my ability to be in conflict with other people because it was a defense mechanism for me to actually be louder or to be more aggressive because I wasn't able to understand or even see that I was afraid. And so by allowing people to shine a light on those within a group setting can be very healing.
There's so much there to unpack. On one hand, I'm thinking there's a loneliness epidemic in the United States.
Mhm.
We're also seeing a lot of conflict within the United States. Does one equal the other? There definitely are going to be things that are feeding into that, right? If you look at some of the work of some of the folks in the counseling community and their research, they'll tell you that socially belonging is a human need, whether it's Maslow or some of the other ones. Even if you can't get into a physical community, it seems like people are finding a community. Some of the communities are not healthy, right? But they're still searching for that connective piece, is what I hear you saying, so that they're finding, well, other people, other people are having these thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts aren't very good, but other people are. So the question is, if you can't, you have a physical space, you have in your group, how would you say you have six, eight? How many folks do you have?
Usually 18.
18.
Mhm.
So you have 18 people who are serving almost as a mirror. Are they serving as a mirror?
Yes, sometimes. I think to each person is very different. It can be a mirror and it can be someone to lean on.
But you're in a safe space. It's
Yeah.
been made safe by you who's made yourself vulnerable. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out how can we help each other
Hmm.
if we don't have that physical space, if we
Right.
see somebody who, the first step is to care about someone, right? Maybe it's a parent or a friend or, how do we create a space for them to have these gestalt or aha moments around their own vulnerability so that it seems like do you need to name it to heal it?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to something you said about having to be connected to somebody else. I think
Yeah.
the first step is to connect to ourselves. And I think
Oh,
for
that
for
makes
the
sense.
majority of my life, I was
Yeah.
not connected with Shai. I was,
Yeah.
it's funny when I first started
Interesting.
teaching negotiation and practicing mediation, I was trying to help other people, but I was not helping myself.
Right.
And so it's very important that I first focus on helping myself before I actually am trying to help other people.
All right, I want to stop you right there because I think a lot of us, me included, are not as much as we should be. So can you give some ways to connect with yourself?
Yes, so I've spent years in therapy. I'm not in therapy right now, but I've done that. I'm a huge fan of therapy, especially if you have the right person. For me personally, it's these weekly meetings I have with my men's group,
Okay.
where any issue that comes up for me during the week, whether it's at work, family, or elsewhere, I can bring in there and I can vent about it and then have people help me understand where that anger and fear comes from and process that. So when I go back out into the world, I'm not bringing all that baggage with me in my interactions with other people. And if I don't have that space to do that, I
Yeah.
will actually cause more harm to other people because, hurt people hurt people. So in addition to doing that, I meditate and I exercise and I try to eat healthy and I try to take care of myself. And it's mostly, but most importantly, I am connecting with people that can provide me a space to not only be myself, but also to grow as a person. And if I don't have that, I'll be unable to help other people. And I think that is part of my frustration when I look at various, whether it's academic programs or professional programs, where the focus is, okay, let's help other people.
Right.
And we don't actually spend any time helping ourselves first. And that is, I think, is the biggest error when it comes to fields that try to help others. But to go back to the question about, okay, you don't have this specific physical space you can come to, what do you do then? So a year ago, I developed and started a new course at UNC called The Practice of Connecting with Strangers. And I started that because I really dislike connecting with strangers on the street. I realized that if I want to learn something, I'd probably have to teach it.
Right.
So I spent, I don't know, 6, 8 months developing this course, talking to people, reading, putting things together. And the course is basically focused on developing the confidence and the tools to engage with anyone. And so, we start in the classroom by learning how to listen to one another, how to connect on a one-on-one basis. And then students are sent out into the world for the duration of the 2-hour class that we
Free
have.
range, yes.
Exactly. And so, it starts slow. It starts with, okay, here's a list of people that I want you to observe. Somebody with a beard or somebody who's has amazing hair or, a piece of clothing that you find really nice or whatever it is. And so, because the most important thing that we don't do is we don't observe people. We don't look at the minute details about them because those usually can be subjects of communication and conversations that we can have with them. The following session, okay, now they have a scavenger hunt and they have a list of people that they have to go and interact with. And it's basically pushing students out of their comfort zone to engage usually with people that they would otherwise not engage with, whether
Right.
it's a business owner in Chapel Hill, an unhoused person, an older person, a younger person, whatever it is. The following session we do an act of kindness. Okay, here's a list of possible things you can do to support somebody else that you don't know. And so they go out and do that. And so again, it's just building that confidence. And I think because especially with the younger generation. I'm assuming you and I used to spend my time with my friends on the street, just
Right. Right.
being a child, but not
Right.
being, there was no internet, there was no
Right.
computer.
Yeah.
And
If
so
you
these
wanted to
days,
see anyone, you had to like call, make a plan, like, and you didn't think twice about it.
right. And I yet to see with my younger students, social media is really the main way people connect with one another. And so the idea of connecting with another person face to face without electronics is scary. And yet over a period of time, they build the skills that maybe you and I take for granted.
Right.
And then one of the activities we do is we provide free listening to the community. So the students would draft or design signs, whether it's free listening, come yap here, come vent, or whatever it is they want to put on. And then we either go on campus or in downtown Chapel Hill, and they hold signs. And in groups of two, three, or four, people will stop by asking what the hell is going on here.
Right.
That's
Right.
usually an opening then to actually talk to them, or people would come and stop and talk about things that are bothering them or something that they want to get off their chest, because sometimes it's easier to open up to a stranger that you'll never see again because they don't have any baggage with you.
Right.
So again, that provides the ability for students and also for members of the community to engage with someone they don't know for a period of whether it's a few seconds or half an hour, whatever it is. And as part of the course, also, we have teamed up with the town of Chapel Hill. They have a crisis unit and also part of their police services where they actually engage with members of the community, whether it's the businesses or the unhoused community. And so students also get to interact with communities that they otherwise would not. Many of my students are seniors, so last year of their program, and they say, this is the first time I've seen a side of Chapel Hill I've never seen before because I only interact with other students.
Right.
And whenever I see, an unhoused person, I just walk by. But now, part of it, they actually have to engage and
Right.
actually see this person as a human. And so, to bring it back to your question, that is one way to actually start connecting with people, even if you don't have the physical space that somebody like me creates.
I love that. I love that on so many different levels. And I'm trying to remember the name of what there's a technique that you're using in counseling, but basically it's where you continually put yourself into spaces where you're uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And when you successfully navigate them, that's what builds true courage, like
Mhm.
real courage,
Yeah.
right? As an aside, Lincoln did that when he used to have a fear of public speaking.
Mhm.
So he would go to parties and he would just start talking, and he was terrible, like really bad. But yet he became this incredible orator. And it's like connecting with people is so fundamental to our emotional health, our mental health, the whole thing. And to your point, if you're just doing it through the computer, through a video game or an online chat room or whatever, you're really not developing those nuanced skills that you would get if you were to sit in a group with 18 people with no barriers in between you and have to read people's body language and things like that
Right.
and
And
develop.
I use a diagram in my class, which I didn't come up with. I saw it, I think, somewhere else, and it has three circles. The circle inside is comfort zone, the middle circle is learning zone, and the outer circle is panic zone. And what I tell my students, the fact that you're taking this course already means you want to step outside your comfort zone. And so my hope is that you're going to step into your learning zone. And learning zone for me basically means the place where I can grow, where I stretch my boundaries, where I'm learning. And then the panic zone is where I feel unsafe
Yeah,
and I feel fear. And so I tell my students, only you know where the line between learning zone and panic zone is. And
yeah.
it's up to you to decide when it's time not to cross that. And so yes, the idea of engaging with people they don't know on the street, for some is a learning zone, for some is a panic zone, and so they have to decide where that line is.
And I think that that's true for any behavior
Hmm.
that you're getting used to or you're wanting to engage in. I mean, I think about, give you an example. When I first was graduated in my 20s like you. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't have the skill set to do it, which was to get a job, right? I knew I wanted to work in the environmental field, but I had no skills whatsoever. And then after you get beat down for a bit, or you're afraid to pick up the phone, or you're afraid to do whatever, you have to move through those concentric circles, right? And now it's like, oh, give me the phone. Like, but that would have been panic zone. I think that model fits for a lot of different things. Kind of any advice you want to give or any practical tips that you want to leave our audience with?
Help yourself before you help others. I think that's for me the most important thing that I've learned about myself, both personally and professionally. I used to view the idea of vulnerability as weakness because it was used against me as a child.
Yeah.
And so I would say until my mid 40s, I was not able to be vulnerable with other people or with myself. I would make jokes or make fun of things to ease the tension that I was feeling. And now I view vulnerability as power because me being vulnerable allows me to be my authentic self with other people.
Yeah.
And if somebody else chooses to use that against me, that says more about them than about me. And so I would want my community and the people that I care for and those watching this and listening to this to put themselves in situations in which they can grow in a vulnerable way. And I think it would make my society much better. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm going to piggyback on that just a little bit. When you make yourself vulnerable, you have to have addressed what we in counseling call the shadow side of yourself, that fearful side. And one of the ways to do that is called reflective listening. So when you listen to somebody and you reflect back what they say, it shows that person that you're paying attention to them. If you do that internally and you say, I don't like people who think the moon is blue.
Mhm.
Well, what does that say about you? Why does that the case? And sit with it for a minute. What is that really about? And you will go into, at least from my experience, there are parts of yourself that you may not like so much or want to embrace, or a part of you gets revealed that you're like, I didn't know that part existed, but it clearly does. Not having any judgment around yourself or anybody else is the only way to make it through the shadow side, has been my experience. It doesn't mean that you excuse everything, but it's like, okay, that was part of my growth. My 20s were part of my growth. That fight was part of my growth. But then it becomes a container, it doesn't become pervasive. It's like, oh, that's who I was then. This is who I am now.
And I would say if there is judgment, figuring out where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because the only way to move past it is to move through it. And the way to move through it is to understand the what triggers that judgment. And that often comes from an experience in childhood or early adulthood and just figuring that out rather than pushing that away.
Yeah, or a script that you've been fed,
Mhm.
yeah. So if people want to learn more about you or learn about your consultancy or things, how do they get in touch with you?
So Tamari Conflict Management is my consultancy. There's a website. It's tamaricm.com. My email is shy@tamaricm.com, and people can reach me there.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.